Kia ora e te whānau, and welcome to Industry Insights. Jessica, can we please have our lovely Industry Insights shared screen up? That would be fantastic. Today you're here with myself, Pamela Bell, the Chief Executive at the New Zealand Institute of Building, and we have a whole crew of people from Te Whatu Ora who are going to talk to us about procurement. And we have got speakers from Wellington, Auckland and Hamilton, and I'll introduce them all shortly. But first of all, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about Industry Insights. This is where we share learnings in a very interactive way. So we have a Slido number, and that Slido, if you go to slido.com, that Slido code is 3861003. So I'm going to just kindly ask Jessica to share her PowerPoint while I introduce our speakers today. So Jeremy Holman, you're coming to us from Auckland. You're the Chief Infrastructure and Investment Officer, we understand. Kia ora, Jeremy. And Paul Herstich, you're coming to us from Wellington, beautiful sunny capital city, I understand today. And you're the Commercial Construction and Procurement Director. Kia ora, Paul. And Stacey Marsh, you're coming to us from Hamilton, or you're based in Hamilton, Waikato, and you're the Manager of Facility Design and Advisory. Kia ora, Stacey. Great. So if we're able to do our wonderful screen sharing, I will hand over. Jeremy, would you like to kick us off with telling us about what's happening at Te Whatu Ora at the Infrastructure and Investment Group these days?
Sure. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Jeremy. I am I can't keep saying this, that I'm relatively new to health. I started in December of last year. I have a background in infrastructure from a number of parts and places and areas around the world. But coming into health was certainly a steep learning curve for me. So I'd certainly like to thank all of you for joining. I acknowledge some of you are going to be familiar with who we are and what we do, or what we look like in our previous guises as DHBs, but obviously there's a huge change to bring us all together. So I'll give you a little bit of background on who we are. I'd also just like to say a slightly belated happy 40th birthday for the 24th of June for your organisation. So background. So Te Whatu Ora was established in July 2022. It brought together 20 DHBs and a bunch of other sort of back office agencies as well into one organisation to support the public health system for New Zealand. So it truly is a national health service, for want of a better phrase. There were somewhere between, depending on how you count it, and the providers as well, between 80 and 90,000 people within Health New Zealand. It is the largest public sector organisation in New Zealand, and it is the largest vertical infrastructure portfolio that the government has. We have we're still working our way through the numbers, because as you can imagine, there's 20 different bits of information out there, but we believe it to be somewhere in the region of $38 billion replacement value for the asset base we have. The IIG, the Infrastructure and Investment Group, was formed sort of on a basis of the Health Infrastructure Unit that sat within the ministry, and now we are going through the process of pulling together all of DHB's facilities and infrastructure teams that are out there. So the HIU, the Health Infrastructure Unit, we became a centralized unit, and to start with has become the hub that we're now bolting and bringing all the others in on the side. And that had some level of responsibility for investment management, asset management, and the delivery of projects. But obviously we're very much changing with the way that we're doing. The last couple of months for me has seen me traveling around the country, visiting most of the old DHBs and getting out to understand the projects, the size, the scale, and also the challenge of bringing all the entities together, because we all do things slightly differently and they're all set up slightly differently. There's somewhere in the region of 950 people within the infrastructure operating group. The infrastructure and investment group. It would be fair to say that doesn't include, we have some elements that are contracted out, we have some elements that are contracted in from the maintenance provide, but we also have a huge amount of external contractors, agencies, consultants that are supporting us in what we are doing. Bringing us together has given us a real good chance to look at the way we do things, provide a much more joined up approach to the way we do things, and be consistent. And that's probably the key thing that we want to do is the level of consistency and sort of commercial savvy that we bring by being a bigger entity. Previously with the DHBs, all 20 of them having to bid to the ministry for money for their projects that they had to write business cases on and go through. It was a pretty unconnected and fragmented approach in the way things were. Sometimes to the extent that those that shouted loudest or could gather the most support, political support, got to the front of the queue. And hence different districts had actually a very different capability for writing business cases, securing funding, making investment decisions, and ultimately delivering projects. We are now, in some ways, they're all seeing eyes across the country. So we see the whole health infrastructure estate. We can be a lot more strategic in what we're doing. And we can also prioritize the investments instead of sort of one or two investments that were done unconnected by individual DHBs and then nothing for a long while and then another bunch that come along. Instead of being like buses where there's big gaps between them and then three come along at once, we are now working on a much more sophisticated pipeline of work and how that was going to play out. So it gives a good steady pipeline, and pipeline being a great word that has been used a number of times over the years in the way we are. We also have not only are we looking at what we need to build, but it's also what we're currently looking after. We have approximately 1,200 buildings, about 80 different campuses that range from full-on hospitals through to smaller healthcare facilities in that side of things. We also know that quite a lot of the estate that we have is aging. Some of it is not necessarily matched for the clinical services that we're providing within it. And some of it has got some challenges, seismic, ventilation and other ones that we're now working our way through. So there's a huge piece of work that we need to do to better understand the state of the assets and then ultimately pull together a whole selection of programs on what we're going to do, how we're going to improve them. And we have a good example will be the seismic piece of work that's underway already, and that's something that started a while back, but we did a full review of the estate, and now we're working our way through what improvements that needs to be, and whether that's dealing with cladding or internal or strengthening, and in some cases actually new buildings that we need. So you will probably be, many of your members and people out there will better know, as well as us, that health services are quite specialised in their design. They're not a standard vertical, certainly, not comparable to really anything else with the size and scale and complexity of the building services that's within these things. You'll also know that the sites are congested. Many of them are congested. We often have to decant one building to then knock it down to build something else to then, and it's this constant moving of it. Buildings are also in use as well. So even if we're working on the existing state, we've then got to manage the aspects. You can't just sort of isolate a building and turn it off from an electricity and utilities perspective because parts of it are still being used. So it is a complex world that we live in, and something that's been a big learning curve for me. The health infrastructure, getting it right is fundamental. It's not just so we can deliver care. It's for our own people. It's for the patients. It's for whānau that are visiting as well. What are we doing? A big piece of work that we're doing, Stacey will talk a little bit around this, is the Australasian Health Facility Guidelines. We are signed up. We are members to that. But we need to be a lot more robust in our use of these guidelines and sort of standardizing the way that we do things. And do our designs. An ensuite should be an ensuite, should be an ensuite, and a ward should be a ward, and we can get a lot more. We should be a lot more consistent and not be reinventing the wheel that we're doing of the way that we're doing things. That in turn makes project management, makes the delivery easier, and ultimately helps simplify supply chain as well for the contractors that are out there on that side of things. We know that the buildings, whilst we want to have this standardized approach, we also need to take into account the different seismic and climatic issues across New Zealand, and obviously having input from for different iwi groups and Maori to make sure that the buildings are culturally appropriate as well. So it's that consistency, but able to then deal with small dial changes as required. That gives us a lot more. That standardization makes things a lot easier from an asset management and a design and a delivery procurement process. We have two pieces of work that are fundamental that we're going on at the moment. First is the infrastructure investment plan. I've talked about the 10-year plan that we have and how we're pushing this, what we're wanting from this. It's at 10 years, it's lined up. That takes into account the state of the estate, but also the changing requirements of clinical service planning. my biggest internal client is the Hospital and Specialist Services Group, and they're looking at, you know, how we bring a lot more consistency nationally to the models of care and the you know, clinical services that we deliver. We don't have that postcode lottery anymore. And so that will drive some of our investments. So that's the infrastructure investment plan. We have to actually have that at Cabinet before December, but by the end of this year. We also have the National Asset Management Strategy, and that has to go to Cabinet by the end of the year as well. And that strategy will lay out the process of how are we going to manage our assets. We know we need to move from being quite reactive to being much more proactive with our maintenance side of things. But first, you know, how we've got to go out, we've got to baseline the estate, we've got to bring that data together. We've got multiple different asset management systems that are out there. Some information used really well, some not so well. How do we bring all that together into a single asset management system? And then how do we plan to use that to drive the investment decisions that come forward? So that's a big piece of work. That strategy has to be, as I say, at Cabinet with Cabinet by Christmas. And our intent is to actually publish both of those. I'm quite into the open reporting side of things. So we want to be able to publish both of those once they've been through Cabinet and are endorsed. So that long-term piece of work is fairly fundamental for us. In terms of actual projects that are in the delivery phase, and you know, we have the planning, the design, the delivery. We currently have about we're funded in two separate ways. One is through the health capital envelope. That is a large lumps of capital that come to us on an annual basis. And the second side will be on the self-funded through depreciation. The pieces that come on. Depreciation funding that goes on, that a lot of smaller projects that's used for is around about $400 million per annum. That's probably about 1,000 smaller projects across the country. But for the larger projects that come through the health capital envelope, which this slide shows here, there's 110 capital worth projects, and they're about $7 billion worth of projects that are either in planning phase or design or even delivery. And you'll know the well-known ones out there. New Dunedin Hospital, Manukau Health Park, Totrahamaru, you know, Tower 4 in Christchurch, some good ones out there. And obviously others that have recently been announced and now gathering steam will be the Whangarei Project Pihi Kaha and Nelson Hospital as well. But there's a large amount that's out there. Yes, we can be a lot more consistent in the way that we're doing things in our budgeting processes. We can actually, now we have access to the whole budget, we can look to move and shuffle funding depending on when it's needed. So not necessarily, you know, earmarking all the money for a project when we know it might be it's got a year worth of design to go through, and then it goes into construction. So we can be a lot cleverer at what we're doing with our work as well. The slide up at the moment, for example, shows the MHIT program. This is a really good example of a piece of work. This came out as funding that went to all the different DHBs, and then clearly the amalgamation has happened. Some of the old districts were absolutely ready to go, took the funding that they had and ran with it because they already had things in train. Some of them not so much. So this is a good partnership of how we're working with those offices that are out around the Whatu, but also how we're coordinating and in some cases delivering centrally, where from the central side, if you want to call it, of the IIG, because some of the districts didn't have, you know, the capacity and capability to you know, take that funding, invest it into new mental health facilities from that side of it. So ultimately, we are an enabler to the health system. The delivery side of things, we have had to, we've got a much more robust approach on project governance, project controls, you know, and can bring a level of consistency that for those of you who have read some of the Te Wahanga documents, looking at their state of the health sector, there's some very good documentation there. And that has effectively driven the development of the infrastructure and investment group, our operating model, the structural piece of work that we're going through, and obviously a lot of the documentation that we're now starting to produce that is useful for industry to understand us and understand, you know, how we're wanting to engage with you. Key thing for me is the word partnership. I've been a consultant, I've been a contractor, I've been a funder, I'm now a client of infrastructure of the industry. And for me, it has to be a partnership. The more we can understand each other's side of the business, make things so much easier. We know we have a pretty big task ahead of us. We know we need to provide clear guidance to the industry and to the sector on what we are and how we do, but we also want to hear from you, and we're looking forward as we sort of land the structure and where we are within, early part, sort of first half of next year. We want to do a lot more engagement, actually bring industry to us to get a better understanding of how you think you can help us with what we're wanting to do. So that's a big piece of work that we've got, that we're under. As I say, what I've got, what I'm trying to sort of explain in the way that we're bringing things together into this national model. We're still going to have teams out across the country. We're still have teams out in this regional setting that you see on here as well. But a big thing for us is the ability that we can now plan nationally, we can coordinate regionally, and the delivery will still happen locally on the ground. So that's enough from me. Thank you very much for the time. I will now pass over to Paul, who will give you some of his words of wisdom.
Can I also just jump in? I'm just sitting here with the slides. So Paul and Stacey, if there's a particular slide you'd like up, to please direct me to it. We've landed on the standardisation one, but we can jump to whichever one you like.
Well, I mean, that's a good example of sort of the things that we're looking at with the standardisation, and I know Stacey may cover off on that, some of these elements here, especially through the design piece. But bringing all of these together, we've got structural fire and seismic gurus around the country, but previously slightly unconnected, or they had sort of loose knowledge sharing ideas. We can bring that into a real strong team that can actually support all across the country, and those smaller ones as well. So this is the opportunities for standardization and consistency in the way
that's great. And here at the Institute of Building, we're working with the Construction Sector Accord and what's called the BIM and NZ Steering Group, Building Information Modelling and NZ Steering Group, around data standardization and creating that shared data environment, that consistent data environment, which then helps with that trust and transparency in the procurement relationship. So very much that lower right circle there about asset data standards. We currently have some great subject matter experts updating what's known as the BIM handbook and the associated appendix around procurement, and we're putting in the front end of that a value case for that shared data built environment. So that's of particular interest to us. And with a former hat on, I used to run an entity called Prefab NZ, now known as Offsite NZ. So very interested in how you're looking at using manufacturing and offsite.
Well, we'll come to that shortly, but there we go.
There you go.
Kia ora, Paul Hurstich Tauko. Is everyone getting an echo there?
Yes, we are getting a bit of echo.
Just
you might need to
Paul, you come off mute now. Now Stacey's gone on mute.
okay, is that better?
we'll go with that.
Okay. Oh, look, that sounds good. Kia ora, ko Paul Hurstich Tauko. Thank you, Jeremy. First couple of slides for me, I think of the next one, which is the delivery. We'll keep going, keep clicking. There we go. So, look, I'm just going to talk to the next two slides on behalf of our Director of Delivery, who wasn't able to join us today. Our new infrastructure investment group that has a delivery function that will sit under a new head of delivery. The function will work really closely with my commercial and procurement team, and are effectively tasked with supporting the successful delivery of the portfolio of projects that sit within health. The themes in the delivery in the project space are consistent with our approach across the organisation and what we're looking to achieve. Firstly, we're looking to build internal capability now that we're a single organisation. We're looking to apply a standard national approach to projects, but in the context of the huge variation of not only scale but complexity of our projects, which start in the few $1 million right through to the many hundreds of millions of dollars. We want to work closely with the sector to understand what has worked in health, what hasn't worked, and where their opportunities are to move forward as a single organisation. And that's, I guess, when I look at that in the delivery space, is that we operate as a single organisation and that we're not seen as multiple individual projects that all just happen to sit in health and are all addressed in isolation. If we jump to the next slide, this one is looking at standardisation. And I think at a high level, for me, this is really about no surprises. In the delivery space, I would think we're seeking to be a known quantity. And I use the joke around Christmas morning when you open the present and you get the roller skates, but you always wanted a skateboard. I think we're in a position to move forward in that the industry will have a fair understanding of how we are seeking to procure, contract, and deliver our projects. The standard approach will be addressed on multiple fronts. Listed in front of you are just a little bit of a snapshot of some of the areas where we're working towards having clear guidance, having frameworks, or processes and systems that wrap around how we work in this space. I'll probably jump to the next slide now. Okay, so now I'm just going to talk about the commercial and procurement function. If we can go to the next slide. Okay. I guess what I've been tasked with is developing a commercial and procurement function that will implement numerous recommendations out of our infrastructure market delivery strategy. That market delivery strategy was developed in 2022 with extensive consultation that included a wide range of public and private stakeholders, which are a number of you on this webinar may have contributed to. So we listened, we took some friendly fire, but some heavy fire in some areas, with the consultation providing industry insights via learnings, experiences, both good and bad, and sort of confirming the industry pain points. And that was all based on how health infrastructure had been procured, contracted, and delivered in the past. The market strategy, amongst other things, provides us with a clear action plan as to how we need to engage with the broader construction sector as Te Whatu Ora, as a single organisation representing health. And within that broader construction sector, we obviously appreciate there's a number of disciplines that sit within there. The plan focuses us on ensuring that the construction sector will have good insight into the health infrastructure pipeline. And this is really a key area that will sit within Jeremy's infrastructure investment group, in that we understand the construction sector will invest in certainty. And where we have a pipeline that is that provides that certainty, and Jeremy's reference to 3 buses and then no more buses for an hour, where we have that certainty, we'll be able to have much better conversations with the construction sector around how health can be delivered in an efficient way. We can jump to the next slide. Before I quickly run through the 5 outcomes of the market delivery strategy, which is sitting on the right-hand side of this slide, I think it's worth quickly acknowledging the problem statements which are sitting there on the left. The consultation that was undertaken identified these as the sort of key areas that need to be addressed. I don't think any of the problems presented there will be a surprise to this audience. They're all interrelated to various degrees, and there's no single solution or silver bullet that's going to shift the dial on any of these areas. I think it'd be worthwhile just to sort of give you feedback around some of the themes that came through that consultation, and a little bit of this is verbatim. So health requires a more disciplined approach to managing scope change and variations. Health needs to mandate standardisation, eliminate bespoke design, and simplify construction. Health needs to ensure that a detailed design brief is locked in prior to the commencement of design. Health needs to ensure a reliable pipeline is presented for the industry to manage the peaks and troughs, and that's particularly around resourcing. And a streamlining is required for the business case approval. So that was sort of the themes that came through around what health needs to do. So the market delivery strategy is centred around those 5 outcome areas on the right. you'll see there's a mixture of aspirational goals or outcomes and more immediate ones. I think the first one there, being a better client, there are a number of things that collectively need to shift for us to start to move in that direction. I believe that is aspirational. I believe there's some things in that area which we simply can't change, in that we operate in a complex environment. Our campuses are cramped and are difficult to work in. And those live environments present a huge amount of issues and complexity. But we can't move away from that, but we need to ensure that we do the best we can in that space. In regards to the commercial procurement function, that fourth outcome area there is sort of the low-hanging fruit, or where we're focusing on first, and it's around efficient procurement. There's some pretty obvious things we need to do. The first one being we need to present ourselves to the construction sector in a well thought way, that we're not competing against ourselves, that we're not adding cost and time through that procurement process, where we're going to the well for the same thing time and time again. So I think there's some low-hanging fruit there that we can address and start to be seen as a single organisation. And if we jump to the next slide. So what we've got here is just a bit of a snapshot of a number of the recommendations and actions that are sitting in front of us. There's around 25 in total, but I think those ones in front of you sort of give you a bit of a flavour of what we've been tasked to do. Jeremy mentioned earlier that the broad theme is a standardised approach and standardised thinking, which I don't even know if that's a thing, but it's again applying consistent thinking across the whole organisation. We're moving away from relitigating the same issues time and time again, but by a different team. And we're looking to, like I said, present ourselves as a single organisation. That'll take time. We won't have that nailed by Friday. I think this is a multi-year continuous improvement exercise. And the new structure has or will set us up to be able to move ahead in a number of these areas. That's really it from me. I'm now going to hand over to Stacey, who's literally sitting right next to me, and she's going to talk through design guidance. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. We might keep Paul's mic on, and if you can hear me okay, then we don't get to worry about that reverb. So if we can go to the next slide. But kia ora koutou, whānau, called Stacey Marsh, taku ingoa. So I work in Jeremy's wider infrastructure and investment team, and I look after our facility design and advisory group. Now, one of our key responsibilities is to support the increased standardisation and efficiencies through the healthcare design. A TPI Tata deliverable, or an interim health plan deliverable for my team, is to develop standards for Aotearoa health facilities, contributing to and developing on the Australasian Health Facility Guidelines, as Jeremy mentioned before. What we do have is a real clear mandate that we need to make sure that we are learning the good lessons from health design and making sure that we are not repeating things, opportunities for improvement, really. Well, and we are taking advantage of those opportunities for improvement, I should say. And how we do that is we develop New Zealand specific design guidance by working closely with our industry partners. We are developing pathways for our industry stakeholders, both internal and external, to provide us feedback on what works well and what doesn't within health design. And we're looking to take that and put it into New Zealand design guidance notes if we need to. But our first and foremost path is to work very closely with the Australasian Health Infrastructure Alliance to put anything that we need from a design guidance in a New Zealand context perspective into the Aus HFDs, because they are Australasian. And while Jeremy alluded to the fact that they haven't necessarily been used as consistently across the country as we would have liked, now we have a mandate that they will be used as the base for all health facility design. It is very important that we understand the New Zealand context in that, because we do have some differences between New Zealand and Australia from policy positions. Obviously, our climatic and our seismic requirements are different, and we've got some cultural safety considerations we need to be aware of. So we work very closely and we hold that relationship. that works as well as us understanding what the issues are. So we do complete research and innovate on innovations and best practice. And we do also provide an advisory function on the health design guidance to help making sure that we are communicating with the users of those guidelines. But again, equally as important that information comes back to us on what's working and what doesn't. We also, as part of my team, are providing a design assurance function on a project by project basis for any applicable projects. And what we do there is we look very closely at the process that's been undertaken, having a view over documentation and supporting good project management through the design process. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Next slide, please, Pamela. So what we have had approved in March this year through the Te Whatu Order Executive Leadership Team is the Design Guidance and Assurance Framework, and that's available on our external-facing Te Whatu Order website. But what that does is it articulates how Te Whatu Order will develop design guidance for health facilities. It does talk about the fact that the AusHFGs are the base for health facility design. What I will say here is that there are times when you have to deviate slightly from those guidelines for one reason or another. There is a deviation process that we are developing. But what our messaging is if you do deviate from those guidelines, is to track and record that so that it's very clear why that is. And through the design assurance process, we are capturing some of those deviations to see whether they are a guidance issue that needs to be educated on, or it needs to be clearly defined, or it needs actually a change in that guidance. We do ensure that guidance is fit for purpose a number of ways, but one of which is providing opportunities for our lived and whānau experience voices to be in the mix when we are reviewing and developing design guidance, as is our political voice. But equally as important as our industry partners is a buildability of design guidance, and the drawings is really a key. So again, making sure that it is visible what guidance is being reviewed and developed so people can provide their feedback into that. Just as Jeremy and Paul have both alluded to, a lot of the information is going to be available on our external facing websites, because we want to make sure that we are setting our teams up for success, letting our teams know what it is that we are looking to have in terms of outcomes, but also how to achieve those outcomes where possible. Within that design guidance framework is also a bit of a conversation around our design assurance processes. And there will be a show bag available on our external facing website that will break down exactly what is needed and what we'll be looking for as part of that process. Again, it's all about ensuring that we've got some standardisation, but also some making sure we're giving our partners what they need to be successful. Next slide, please. Thank you. So standardisation and design, that's really important to us. And there are plenty of opportunities that we can take full advantage of through this space. The starting point is mandating the AusHFG as the base, because having a common base to start from is step one, I believe. And of course, the New Zealand specific design guidance note that sits on top of that just makes sure that New Zealand context is really, really well represented in that space. I think we've had conversations, and you mentioned off-site manufacturing, Pamela, but with repeatable design and increasing the use of off-site manufacturing is being investigated as a way in standardisation in design. We're working very closely and connected with the Construction Accord cross-governmental working group on off-site manufacturing, on data and digital, and the digital twin space as an examples of that. We do realise that when we say standardisation and off-site manufacturing, they're both broad spectrum terms and mean a lot of different things to different people. So we are really investigating what that looks like, what are the good, better, best things that we can do, and how to be able to move along those spectrums. And we're also working again to have visibility over key documentations on the website. I really believe that giving visibility of what we are doing and how we are doing it creates an environment where people can provide us feedback. My team is certainly not the be-all and end-all of all things health infrastructure. You've got some phenomenal expertise and experiences within your members, and we want to provide opportunity for those to be tapped into. So there's a huge pieces of work to be done in this space, and we are open to hearing it. We are looking and investigating into it, but we're also very, very realistic about where we are in the system and taking some practical steps to get to where we need to. So I think that's me. We're probably open for some questions now.
Fantastic, and that was great. Thanks very much, Jeremy, Paul and Stacey. We are taking questions at slido.com, and you can see the code there, 3861003. We have a few questions in Slido there and a couple at the top. I'll just ask them if that's all right. I think you've covered off in terms of the role that prefab or offsite will play. You're saying you're working at cross-government level, and of course you acknowledge that there's a broad scale of sizes of components and solutions. Is there anything that this audience needs to know about your approach to standardization and manufacture in terms of how they might get involved?
Yeah, sure. I can touch on that. So there's a couple of things that I think that we are looking to do in the coming months. Is we're really interested in understanding what's out there in terms of offsite manufacturing already. We do know that some of the health projects have had small scale offsite manufacturing opportunities taken. So we are going through our portfolio and our in the wider infrastructure group to understand what they were. So more than happy to take any comments or questions or feedback around that. We have a facility.design at health.govt.nz inbox, and I'm happy to share that in the chat to please send any of that through to us, and we are collating what that looks like. And we're also working very closely with our Australian jurisdictions on what's happening in health in Australia in terms of offsite manufacturing there. So I guess my call to arms would be, if you've got any feedback, any lessons learned, any projects that you've done sort of studies on, etc., then let us know. But we're working very closely across sector and across agencies to make sure that we're doing, we're learning those lessons once, really.
Right, because one of the follow-on questions is about how we're learning from offshore. And I know probably about 10 years ago, I saw in Australia at a Prefab Oz conference, a built exemplar, I think it was Hickory and Jacobs, where they had the hospital room with the bathroom, a slice of corridor, and then another corresponding room and bathroom on the other side. So the full volumetric piece constructed. I'm not sure where that technology got to in particular, but yes, lots of great solutions offshore. Is there anything we need to know about any particular country you're looking to around how you're looking to do standardization, data standardization, or procurement going forward?
Yeah.
Hey, look, I can jump in around procurement. I think there's nothing we're doing here in New Zealand which is bleeding edge. We're not conquering new frontiers here. The opportunity presented to us here is to be more efficient in how we apply ourselves now that we're a single organisation. I think in respect to, what are the first things we're going to look at in regards to procurement? I've touched on that, just being more efficient in how we interact with the market. I think that balances out that our obligation is to pull out cost and time that is unnecessary and shouldn't be there, and that we're now in a position to change. But it also put it out there that we expect that we are, the flag is raised where we haven't realised that we've maybe gone out for the same thing we went out a few minutes before, and that it's going to be presented back to us just with a different letterhead. So again, we just want to work with the construction sector and the disciplines within to help ourselves, and some of that will, I believe, come from the sector, ensuring that we're aware of the opportunities for us to be more efficient. In regards to procurement of panels or pre-qualification, it's definitely an area we need to understand what are the opportunities at a national level, at a regional level, and also at a local level. We're facing the situation of, say, a small town where there's only, for example, 2 plumbers or 2 builders. How do we set up an arrangement there that's not too onerous, that works for all parties? And at the other end of the scale, what are the national opportunities to have a master agreement with a panel or some type of arrangement where each of the campuses can sort of just fall out of pre-agreed T's and C's and pricing. So that's sort of the scale of what we do there. So all of these things have to be identified in regards to what is the opportunity to put us in a better place than where we were. As you can imagine, there's 1,000 opportunities there, so it's really ensuring that we cut to the chase quickly where we can make the most impact. So that's pretty much sort of the approach in that procurement space.
Okay, and in terms of procurement, we're interested, or our members are interested in understanding how you use best practice, how you will align with government procurement guidelines, for example, or whether there'll be any input from the Crown Infrastructure Delivery Agency, Royal Paenga, or is there anything that our members need to know in terms of what that standardisation looks like in your procurement? Because you mentioned broader outcomes, and I understand that we'll distribute a URL to your website that's got some of those documents on it. Is there anything else that's worth mentioning here in the next couple of minutes?
Hey, look, I could probably do the first bit of, just to round out the procurement, and Jeremy, you may want to jump in after that. We're required to apply the government rules, so that's a give me. I think the opportunity for us is around applying those rules is ensuring that we're fair and transparent, and there's principles that sit in behind them. So what I want to understand is where's the opportunity to work with the construction sector, and I might use the example of, say, tier 1 construction contractors for our mega projects. You know, these are the Dunedin type projects, which are in the many, many hundreds of millions. Is there an opportunity to work in a different way when we've got a secure pipeline that we can meet our obligations to be fair, open and transparent, but we can get better outcomes rather than posting a $700 million tender on GETS for a fixed price lump sum, crossing our fingers we get 3 competitive bids. That world is gone. You know, we're not operating in that space. So we need to be innovative. We need to ensure we commit to being open, fair and transparent. But if we don't do things differently, nothing's going to change. So I don't have any answers there, but that's the sort of thinking that I want the team to lead around the art of the possible, which sounds like a cliche, but it's definitely what we need to do. Jeremy, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, with regards to Royal Paenga, or Takro as they previously were, my previous role to this, I was at Crown Infrastructure Partners Limited, which is, I suppose, a sister organisation in some way, very much focused on the funding of large-scale projects, programs such as the Shovel Ready program, through water stimulus funding, etc. Look, we work closely with Takro as they were then from that side of it. Royal Paenga does have a role to play going forward. But from a health perspective, that's not part of their remit. We'll clearly work very closely with them. There's an awful lot of good learnings to be learned from there. You know, they've been through some of the challenges that they've had in their number of their roles that they've had. So we're keen to work with them and work with John O'Hagan, on a number of things. But they are not going to be taking responsibility for delivering or procuring some of our infrastructure, some health infrastructure. With sort of $7.5 billion, in our back pocket that we need to spend, as well as, our own internal funding, we need to build this capability ourselves, and it's not, we don't need to do everything, because clearly we want to bring knowledge from industry, but we're of size and scale of enough now that I need to have an infrastructure, an investment group that can, do what it needs to do.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just going to round us out and bring us to a close, as we just have 1 minute left. Firstly, I just wanted to thank the 3 of you very much for your presentation, Jeremy, Paul and Stacey. We will make sure we share both this recording, the PDF of your presentation, plus the additional documents you've referred to, and your website URL. For folks who are tuning in to the Institute of Buildings Industry Insights, the next one is on Thursday, the 11th of October at midday. We will be hearing, courtesy of Bluebeam, from Ignite Architects directors Kevin Adesco and Jeremy Betzman about the way they're using technology in the way they design and deliver. So we wanted to say thank you very much to our presenters. It's very exciting to see the work you're doing. We understand the scale of your challenge. The members are here absolutely to support you in any way possible, and we will be making sure we keep updated as the pipeline and your plans and strategies develop and get delivered and get through the good people at Parliament doing the hard yards. Cool. So thanks very much for joining us today, folks. Ka kite anō. Goodbye.
Thank you. Kia ora, bye.
All right, thank you.